Attacks across the Middle East continue this morning as the United States and Iran give conflicting signals on possible peace talks. President Trump says conversations are underway with multiple major points of agreement. Iran, however, denies such talks, with the Speaker of the country's parliament calling it, quote, fake news used to manipulate the financial and oil markets. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is also weighing in, saying that Trump believes there is a way to leverage, in his words, military gains into an agreement that will, quote, safeguard our vital interests. Netanyahu added, however, that Israel will continue attacks both in Iran and Lebanon, as damage can be seen across Tehran from Israeli airstrikes. Iran this morning is hitting back. An explosion was heard and smoke seen in Tel Aviv just hours ago, leaving buildings damaged and cars burning. Israel's emergency response service says several people were wounded as search and rescue teams deploy to that area. Sirens are sounding today not only in Israel, but across the Gulf. Kuwait says it intercepted missiles. Saudi Arabia says it destroyed drones. And Bahrain says it urged residents to head to the nearest safe place. A lot of turmoil in the region. And then, of course, there's President Trump speaking more about potential negotiations with Iran yesterday afternoon during an event in Memphis, Tennessee. Watch.
But we'll see what happens. I think there's a very good chance we're going to end up in a deal. And so we're giving it 5 days, and then we're going to see where that takes us. And I would say at the end of this period, I think it could very well end up being a very good deal for everybody, as good as if we went all the way and just literally annihilated the place, which if we don't have to do that, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing.
A lot of questions for national political reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Ken Thomas. So, Ken, it's a pretty stark disconnect, I think, between what we're hearing from the Iranians and what we're hearing from the president. But even the way the president is talking about it, you know, one of the questions he was asked yesterday is, OK, you're doing these negotiations. Who are you doing the negotiations with? And even that led to a pretty unclear, murky answer. So what's the actual truth of this? Who's talking to who and what's the deal?
It's how you define the word talks. So essentially what happened was in our reporting show, we're reporting this morning that there have been some back channel discussions through intermediaries. So countries like leaders of Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, who clearly want to de-escalate this issue and are concerned about this spilling out further into the region. And so what they are trying to do is bring the parties together. There have been discussions about having some kind of meeting later this week involving potentially Vice President Vance. They have talked about a meeting perhaps in Islamabad. And so, you know, the question is this a real off-ramp? You know, the sense we have is that the president, you know, saw an opportunity here over the weekend. He heard about these discussions and decided that this was an opportunity for him, you know, to take this issue in a different way. It's also very convenient that he announced it at the start of the trading week, and it's a 5-day period that he wants to see this play out. So it really takes off the table potentially more financial turmoil that we've seen. You know, after he announced it, we immediately saw, you know, the market, the financial market go up and oil prices go down. So, you know, this is potentially a window to de-escalate the situation.
It's also potentially a window into the things that actually push Trump to action, right? I mean, the initial reason for why this war had to begin when it did still remains, I think, unclear to many of us. Was there an imminent threat? You've got key people in the intelligence apparatus saying yes, saying no. I mean, it's really confusing. And then on the other piece of it, when you see the ways that he has, through phone calls with reporters, through certain Truth Social posts, tried to manipulate markets or at least make them not as bad as they've been. I mean, does that show how the White House is also thinking about this? It's an unpopular war on its face, but then the impacts financially are really hard on Americans as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scoreboard that every American drives by every day, and it's called the gas station. And the numbers have just, you know, continued to climb in recent weeks. I think we also have to pull back and keep in mind that this conflict has always been premised on the idea that it could be a quick, work to reduce the tensions and to eliminate the Iranian threat. We're now in week 4. This has been couched as a 4 to 6 week long war. White House officials would often say this will be a matter of weeks, not months. If we move beyond this week and things start spilling out and escalating, and if you were to have some more attacks on the energy infrastructure, that could have long-term damage to the region, and it could make the goal of reducing gas prices much harder.
Yeah.
So, this could really be an inflection point this whole week.
And that was always where the Israeli goals and some of the targets that they were hitting were in stark contrast and, frankly, dissonance with the American goals and the way that the administration here wanted to handle the ongoing conflict. I think that's fascinating. And then, of course, we'll drive toward any kind of potential meeting that happens later this week. Important and interesting if Vance is ultimately the one in the room, too, given the ways that he has been sort of non-interventionist throughout all of this.
Right. It might also signal that talks have advanced.
Yeah.
They would get to a point where maybe you could actually have some kind of initial agreement.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, too. The other place that we're looking for potential agreement is on the Department of Homeland Security. And so as we're talking about that potential deal, the White House border czar Tom Homan is also saying that there will be more deployments of ICE agents to U.S. airports after agents were stationed at 14 airports yesterday, including in New York, Atlanta, Houston, and Chicago. The Trump administration says the aim is to help backfill the understaffed TSA, which has led to extremely long lines at several locations amid this ongoing partial government shutdown. That said, there are now new signs that a deal could be reached, and at least reached soon, to end it and reinstate funding for the TSA. After a meeting at the White House last night, Senate Republicans now believe President Trump is willing to accept a potential deal to reopen the Department of Homeland Security, even if it doesn't fully fund ICE. That's according to Republican senators briefed on the meeting. This would mark a significant shift for Trump because he previously said he would not agree to anything unless Congress passed the Save America Act first. That's that voter bill that they're passionate about. Under the proposal presented to Trump, Senate Republicans would pass additional money for ICE under the budget reconciliation process. So basically what they're doing here, Ken, is let's fund everything except for ICE and CBP. We'll circle back around to it in another reconciliation bill, which is that partisan process that they used last summer to pass the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. There's such little appetite for reconciliation on the Hill again, and yet that looks like it's going there. But B, talk about what might be driving the mindset shift for the president, who was really dug in on this.
Yeah, he's been dug into this for weeks. But, now I think what's different is that people are going to the airport for spring break, and they're facing 3.5-hour lines to get through security. And the White House sees those images, and they know that the public doesn't really like that. So I think there's more pressure on both sides to come to some kind of an agreement. I thought it was interesting that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, basically said linking the Save America Act to all of this was not a realistic path. So, that is a message being sent to the White House that, we have to take another approach here.
And yet, this was already an inflamed situation when you see lines as long as the ones that we're showing on our screen. And then at the same time, isn't it another further inflammation to send ICE agents there? I mean, I've even seen videos on social media, as many of us have, of people being pulled out of line and taken away. I mean, isn't this one of the very things that put us in this partial government shutdown in the first place? Yeah,
and it depends on how those ICE agents are utilized, too. If they are, taking positions in certain security areas that allows TSA agents to be more on the screening side, maybe that would work. But, it could be viewed as an escalation. And also, the president also threatened yesterday to potentially send in the National Guard to some of these airports. So, where do we go from here? I think there seems to be an interest, though, but both among Chuck Schumer and some of the Senate Republicans who met with the president to reach a deal. There seems to be optimism. So we'll have to see where it goes this week.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be some renewed optimism on the Hill. And you're right. We will see where it goes because we've seen these deals come together and then fall apart. Right. This is as close as they've been, though, during this shutdown. We'll see what we see as we get back to Capitol Hill today. National political reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Ken Thomas, thank you, as always. Great to see you. And one more thing before we take a quick break. We're learning new information about that deadly runway collision at LaGuardia Airport. The two pilots killed in that crash, Antoine Forrest and Mackenzie Gunther, were described by officials as young men at the start of their careers. Officials say Air Canada Express Flight 8646 collided with a Port Authority fire truck while landing Sunday night at about 104 miles per hour. The truck was responding to another emergency after a United flight aborted takeoff due to a suspicious odor. Air traffic control recordings captured the urgency in the moments after the crash, including a controller acknowledging a critical mistake.
That wasn't good to watch.
Yeah, I know I was here. I tried to reach out to my staff, and we were dealing with an emergency earlier. I messed up.
No, man, you did the best you could.
More than 40 people were hospitalized, including a flight attendant who was thrown from the aircraft and will require surgery for multiple leg fractures. The 2 occupants of the fire truck were also hospitalized but are expected to be released. The NTSB is continuing its investigation and says it hopes to have more details today. LaGuardia has since reopened, but the main runway is going to stay closed as investigators continue their work.